Hi, I'm Alexis,
And I'm Kim.
and this is the Whatcha Watchin podcast. And this week we are talking about The Flash. And
Yes, we are.
this is going to be a little bit of a weird one. So I think let's just start out with like a non-spoiler, quick thoughts. Would you recommend just sort of something like that? Because Kim, you've seen this movie twice now.
Yes, I
Which
have.
Are you okay after that?
You know, the I am in the positive camp on this. I have been notoriously all over the map as it relates to DC, especially the Snyder era cinematic universe. Some of them I've really enjoyed, but others have just not been my speed. This one, I think we both agree, is about as far away from that as you can get. And as a result, I had a blast with this one. The first time, especially. Second time, it slowed down a little bit, but the humor works for me, the tone, the pacing. I settled in really nicely into the weird, wonderful, wacky nook that this movie occupies. And I had a blast both times. I really enjoyed this one.
I think I it's weird because I simultaneously hated it and loved it. I was confused by it. I was fascinated by it. It was like it was like experimental art or something for me, where it was like all the like outside context of this movie. There was no getting around that. And knowing that this was like, I mean, they've been working on trying to get this going for like, a decade or maybe more, you know, and it was such a weird thing to know, like, well, this happened and then this happened and then that changed this. And then, of course, we've got the Ezra situation and we've got DC, basically kind of being rebooted and all this stuff. So I had all this in my mind going into it. And at first I was just like, what is this? What am I watching? And then as it started to get weirder, I think I just kind of went like, I sort of just let myself float down the river of its weirdness. And that was when I started to enjoy it. But I was like, I don't know if I'm enjoying this for the reasons they intended, or if I'm enjoying this in like this is a train wreck, oh my God, it's so fascinating kind of way.
I mean, there needs to be a movie about the making of this movie. I think we said that after the time we watched it. And this is going to come with baggage, and this is going to come with struggles, especially if you're in the community that we are in.
Totally.
Ezra Miller makes this a hard film to exist.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things, I think, like I always just try to judge a movie on the movie, but because this movie is like 95% shit going on outside of this movie, it was very difficult to judge the movie on the movie. I will say, like I said in my review, I was never bored. There was never a minute where I was like, oh God, like, even though it was a long movie, I think I was just really fascinated by the choices that were going on. So even like, there was times where I was like, this is so terrible that it's fascinating. And then there was a couple times where I was like, man, these jokes are really landing, or I really like Michael Keaton, or these different things. So it was such a strange watching experience because I felt like it was like me versus the movie. And then sometimes it was me just enjoying the movie. So I don't know. I was really like, we'll get to it more when we get into spoilers, but some of the cameos, some of the references, some of the things in there, I was like, my brain couldn't process it.
Once that baby goes in the microwave and the first 20 minutes, you know where this film is going to go.
Yeah, that's where you kind of have to like, at that point you decide, like, are you going to just be with this movie and go with it? Or are you going to be like, what the hell am I watching? And I was kind of both.
It's showing itself to be incredibly divisive. I mean, you've still got people we know have declared this their favorite movie since the Nolan era. And and then I've seen riled tweets about this being miserable, dreck, and evil, and ghastly, and ghoulish, and wow, my head spins at the difference between the reactions, because I think I'm not quite favorite since Dark Knight. I definitely enjoyed it, and it ranks as one of my more enjoyable superhero film experiences lately, but I didn't hate, it's the Ezra Miller of it all aside. It's a totally perfectly enjoyable, serviceable movie. Had they even yielded to some of the fan, I wonder what would have happened if they yielded to the fan outcries and put somebody like a Grant Gustin in there, what that movie could have been.
Yeah, it's really like, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into spoilers because I want to talk about the details of this movie and specific things that we thought that worked or didn't work or whatever.
Right.
So this is the official spoiler warning. The movie's not doing particularly well at the box office. So chances are if you were gonna see it, you've already seen it, or you're gonna wait till streaming. And also this universe may or may not continue, probably won't. We don't really know. It's not doing well, so it probably won't continue, but anything could happen at this point. So the consequences of the spoilers of this movie are probably not very great in the grand context. So spoiler warning here. So obviously there are two Barrys in this movie. Ezra is in this movie twice. So I think that
twice
alone
the
is
Ezra.
Yeah. And then technically kind of a third time because we also get that sort of dark flash monster Ezra at the end. That is a choice considering all the context of Ezra and there are many crimes and misdemeanors. That is, I was like, wow, we are literally doubling down on this actor, which is interesting.
And they've continued to double down even after, I mean, we had articles, not more than a week or two ago with the production team going, yes, there's a sequel written, it's a potential, and it would include Ezra. So they're committed. DC has committed themselves hardcore to this performer.
Which is, I mean, like, that alone shocking and strange and a weird, I mean, of all the people in the Justice League sort of universe to pick to be like, this is what we're backing our whole thing on.
Yeah.
That's a wild choice. But, there's so much going on with DC and Warner and all that stuff that it's kind of like, all right, we're just going real weird here. Then on top of that, you have so the comedy in this is something really interesting. I think occasionally there are times like Ezra, like the Flash is kind of an annoying character. And that's kind of how they've set this up from the beginning, from like the Joss Whedon Justice League reboot and stuff. They've made the Flash kind of an obnoxious, like Peter Parker-esque, but more nerdy and quippy and kind of annoying in a lot of ways. So sometimes I think that works. And sometimes I think it doesn't work. I think it works better here when we have the young Flash. I don't know why it seems to land better when we have the kind of like, this kid is an idiot, this is an obnoxious kid kind of thing. But I did like that there was a distinction between the two Flashes. And I do think Ezra plays it where there is like a very clear distinction between the two. Some of the like CG and face replacement, the CG in this is whack. I mean, let's just say that from the gate. Like, it's so odd to the point where now I'm seeing them saying, no, it's a conscious choice. And I'm like, is it though? Is it like just poorly rendered, or you didn't have time, or you didn't have money, or you didn't have whatever, and now you're trying to come up with excuses for it? And I almost wondered if it was a conscious choice because it's so bad and so rubbery that I was like, this can't be, like, in a way, maybe it is intentional. And this is what I mean about this movie just messes me up because I can't decide what are they doing seriously and sincerely, and what are they doing just because they're like, this will be whatever. So the CG is totally one of those things where I'm like, am I supposed to be taking this seriously? The baby in the microwave, the dog, like that entire sequence with the baby in the microwave is one of the weirdest things that I've seen in a superhero movie, like, in the past maybe 5 years or something.
Well, I will say, I mean, I saw it really early in the preview, once they start rolling out the fan screenings, and that might have also hurt this film a little bit because there were so many opportunities to see this film before opening.
Definitely.
If you're going to see this film, and that first screening was the ideal way to see it. You knew the fans were there. Every single line that was there to get a cheer, got a cheer. There was applause, there was hoots, there was hollering. You give these people 5, 6 times to go see the film before release and then wonder why it's bombing at release. Who knows? I've already seen it twice and I'm not a big DC person. But yeah, getting back to the CG, I will say between those two cuts, because I know the first cut that we saw was not, the publicity team was very clear this was not finished. There were two very specific things that were missing. The CG got a little bit better from that first cut to that second cut. So they were working on it. Wow. I've seen people on Twitter comparing it to that notorious nightmare fuel horror show Polar Express.
Oh, there's definitely Polar Express vibes big time with this CG.
Weird, uncanny valley. And there were moments that, particularly that, like, I don't even know what to call it, that like stadium thing that the Flash ends up in when he's traveling through time. That reminds me a bit of It. And I'm going to butcher the last name, Andy Muschietti, the director.
It's either Muschietti, I don't know exactly.
Muschietti. He directed It. Very much reminds me of some of the stylistic choices from It. Mm-hmm. So some of this could be conscious, could be his vision. Not all of it, though. The baby in the microwave, there's a few, you see it particularly when the Flash is doing the speed. They're clearly befuddled with the speed work. In the old days, we would have just overcranked or ran a slow filter through it. Mm-hmm. Now we're doing nightmare fuel computer stuff to try and turn it into slow motion, when in the 1920s, they could have done it just fine. Yeah, totally. I'll just say that.
Yeah, it's that entire sequence with the baby, I feel like was like a nod to, you know, in the Snyder cut of the Justice League, there's that scene with the hot dog and Iris West where it's like the slow-mo and he's like, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's like a nod to that. But that was done, like, one thing about Zack Snyder, he knows how to do slow motion. That's sort of his whole thing. So he like nailed that in that sense, where it was like, he kind of gets how to like make a slow motion scene that works. This was kind of like, what if we did that, but we don't know how to do that? So, but we want to do it, but we don't know how. And it felt a lot like that in many ways, where it was like, there was like a Son of the Mask, like weird, terrible, almost borderline animation kind of quality to it, where I was like, are we trying to go for like cartoon style, or are we trying to make this look photoreal? Because it's neither, really. So it was just such a weird decision. And then what did you think about, there was a lot of weird, like, you know, the face replacements when you have like the double flashes, or like there's some things like there was Ben Affleck. I'm like, was he even in this, or did they just take shots of his chin and like pop it into a weird bulldog mask, which was bizarre. Then there's, you know, Keaton. Michael Shannon, who I'm like, I don't even think Michael Shannon was here. I feel like they literally like, that feels like it was fed into like Midjourney or like an AI, and they just said like, generate Michael Shannon's face on this thing, because it was like, well, parts of Michael Shannon's face appear in this film, but I don't know if Michael Shannon really is in this movie or not, or if it's like a AI recreation of him, which was weird. Like,
I will say I did not notice it as much with Miller in the double flashes. I think there was once or twice where I went, I bet that's a double. But to me, that was a little smoother. I really noticed it with the Batmans.
Yes.
And that was something that also got a little smoother from cut 1 to cut 2. There were a number of places where it's like, oh, this is not Ben Affleck. This is not Michael Keaton in that suit. Particularly, I mean, bless him, Michael Keaton's 71 years old.
He's a treasure. We love Michael
He's
Keaton.
A treasure, but we know he's not going to be in there doing these fight scenes.
Totally.
There were a number of moments in those action sequences where it's like, that's not, it was clearly facial replacement. They're probably throwing his face over the bottom half of the mask. And that Michael Shannon, there were moments there where I openly wondered, is this Michael Shannon, or are they just using Zack Snyder B-roll? You know, completely. Is he really even here?
This is what I mean, though, about like, you watch a movie and you think you're going to be in like the story of the movie, but instead you're going like, do you think this is like something from the Snyder cut that they had? Like, I should be thinking about how they're Frankensteining together this movie while I'm watching the movie. But that was all I could think of.
I mean, it's very much a nod to Back to the Future too. I felt.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of moments in Back to the Future 2 where it's like, oh, or Back to the Future 2 where it's like, oh, this is just a different angle of Back to the Future 1.
Totally.
So that's where my head was at throughout, going, okay, so this is where and you have the ongoing Eric Stoltz joke throughout. This is clearly in their universe, in their realm. So I was watching it going, okay, so is this B-roll? Is this something they captured? Because this is clearly how they're choosing to Frankenstein it together.
Yeah.
It was clunky because of, let's say it again, the computers. This has hit Marvel. This has hit DC. This is a common problem.
Yeah.
And these filmmakers, I don't know if they're choosing, this is the cheaper way to do it. They're hurting their films as a result. There could be better ways to do it, but if the computer graphics are so bad, it's pulling you back from the film. Essentially what you just said, you're sitting there going, oh, why are they, what's going on here? It's so bad, it's pulling you back from the film, and you're losing the magic and the immersive nature of the cinematic experience.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's like, maybe it's just, everything is so reliant on CG now. And I'm sure the poor CG artists are just like, it's just like
they're not getting paid enough. This point. It's a factory and they're not getting paid enough.
And clearly they're not able to put like their artistic input into things. It's just like, crank this out. Because when we see stuff like Avatar, it can be done. Yes. You can do really good special effects. Like you can have CG that is like indistinguishable from actual photography, but clearly you need a lot of time and money to do that. And I don't
James Cameron.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't get the sense that any studio is willing to put that kind of time and money into things other than like that mad genius James Cameron level of filmmaking. But I think like, the story of this is kind of simple in a sense. It's like we have a lot of these multiverse. Oh, if I could change the past, if I could, whatever. I know a lot of people have compared this to No Way Home. And I think that's a fair comparison. This though, to me is like just such a weird version of that, where like, there's so many things. There was like, it's a weird thing in that it sort of is a stretch between kind of two worlds. We're kind of still stuck in the Snyderverse, which is like grim and dark. So we still have some Snyder elements in there. We've got Michael Shannon and Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot's in this, which again, the lasso of truth joke for like the 8th time. How many times have we seen that at this point?
I laughed hard though. I love
so many. I was just like, is this the only thing we can bring in Wonder Woman so we can do this one joke again? Which was insane. And then on top of that, they're trying to then kind of mix, like, what if we take the Grim Snyderverse, but then we also take like plucky No Way Home kind of Spider-Man quippy stuff and put that in there. And then like, I thought the Back to the Future references worked. I actually really I thought it was great to do the Eric Stoltz thing. There's a lot of jokes in here that I feel like are like film Twitter jokes, where I'm like, the Eric Stoltz Back to the Future thing, we have to talk about the Nick Cage situation, because that was, I think, to me, both my favorite and least favorite moment of this, for the same reasons. And like, that was the moment where I was like,
that whole ending. Yeah.
I was like, Nick Cage showed up and I literally was like, there's a gas leak in this theater. There's no way. Like, I was like, I think we're all slowly like asphyxiating. Like this is not happening.
This is the only way to explain it.
So that was its own insane thing. But there's this weird blending of tones in here that sometimes works really well and sometimes just is a disaster, but a disaster in a way that's really entertaining. So it's just like, I don't know what this is. We saw this like a week ago and I still don't know what to make of it. I'm still kind of like, did I enjoy this or did I enjoy it because I didn't enjoy it? Like it's so weird. It's just such a bizarre thing to me.
And I have seen some reviews call out that change in tones, that when you're juggling like that, something is going to be left out to dry. It didn't bother me. I was really into the humor, but then I don't condone Ezra Miller. Garbage human being, everything that they've done, no support here. They're a heck of a good performer. I think they are. I liked grim, older I liked Barry with a little knowledge.
Mhm.
I have always been sucked into Ezra's performances going back to Fantastic Beasts.
Mhm.
I find them incredibly captivating, incredibly charismatic to watch. Everything they're doing off camera.
Well, that's what's so hard is like, it's hard to even talk about this
Damn
movie
it,
because,
Ezra.
yeah, because you have to be like, okay, we're talking about the movie within the context
Yeah.
of what we see on the screen, right? And that's the most important part of a movie is like, what, how does the movie, like, how is the execution of this film? Does it work? And then, you know, there's always a lot of shit going on outside of these things, especially as we like basically the more you learn about the people who make movies, the more you're like,
They're
Jesus, I
not
can't
great
enjoy
people.
a single movie because everyone's garbage.
There's,
And this especially garbage, you know,
yeah.
like on video garbage, multiple cases garbage, the poor state of Hawaii garbage. So it's like we got a whole lot going on here with that outside of this. And then you have to try to like wrestle with, okay, but now I have to watch this movie and just try to experience this movie as its own thing. So we're kind of looking at it that way here, where we're just kind of like, does this work? Does this performance work? Do the jokes work? You know, does the execution of this work? And I think, you know, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
And if they would have committed on either side, it probably would have worked even better. They can clearly land the jokes. Young Barry was a hoot in places, but then Miller has already shown themselves to be a fantastic dramatic actor. They can handle the heavy stuff. They can the grief plot in here, I think, is incredibly poignant. It doesn't have as much time to simmer because you've got Eric Stoltz, and I love Eric Stoltz. I was so glad for an Eric Stoltz reference. But you have those landing. This is a film written by fans. This is incredibly fan servicey. Every frame of this is a love letter to, I would say, 90s comic book movies. So this is like the Gen X millennial love letter to the comic book movies that we grew up with.
I think that's fair. I mean, the Keaton Batman stuff for sure. I wish we had seen a little more, because to me, like, I associate the Keaton Batman with that like Tim Burton aesthetic of like the sort of German expressionist, like, you know, I mean, there's a certain quality to it. And that was the only thing I was a little bummed. I'm like, well, you have Keaton Batman. Great. Let's get real like gothic and let's get real Tim Burton-y in terms of how this looks. And it was just sort of like, well, it's basically like any Batman story, but Keaton's here. And it was like, no, get it, like make it more. I mean, other than like some of his technology looked like it was kind of rooted in that like 90s kind of style.
That Batcave was very German expressionist in places.
It was like it's in places, but I was like, man, take it up a notch. Like if you're going to give me Keaton Batman, go full Burton with it and like really give me that aesthetic. Cause I just think that it also would have made a distinction in the universes a little more. I mean, if you really want to have where we're hopping between different sort of parts of the multiverse,
right?
Like it was like one of my complaints about Multiverse of Madness was that they're like, oh, this is a different, you know, version of the multiverse. Like they were in a different universe. And in this one, it's the same, only some of the plants are purple or something. And it was like, okay, but it's just the same as before. Like it's not weird enough. It's not distinct enough. And especially coming off of, I mean, this movie comes out, what, like 2 weeks after Spider-Verse or whatever?
Right.
And it's like, which, you know, is using animation to give us really distinct versions of these characters and multiverse stuff. It felt like such a weird missed opportunity to make everything just sort of feel the same. Like it was like, oh, a couple things are different. You know, Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly, but everything else looks exactly the same. And it's like, but that's not like, doesn't feel like a multiverse then. Like really give me something different then.
To me, the multiverse element is such a throwaway in here.
Totally.
I mean, they dropped the multiverse thing in there because every other flippin' superhero movie is dropping it. Where my head goes instead, this isn't so much a multiverse movie as Back to the Future 2. If you're of a certain age, we all know that Christopher Lloyd scene, the timeline skewed off to create an alternate 1985. This is Barry's.
That was spaghetti.
Yeah, this is Barry's alternate 2003 or whatever it is. So they threw in, to me, They threw in the multiverse because they had to, and every other superhero movie's doing it. But this isn't so much a multiverse because they didn't play into it. Because
Yeah.
like you just said, it's nothing different. There's just a few quirky things that changed. So it's Barry went back and steps on a butterfly. We've been handling this timelines, time travel stuff since Back to the Future and before. This is not new.
Yeah. What did you think of? So there is a big scene at the end where we get these weird rubbery CG cameos of all these different Batman and Superman and everything throughout history. That was like, I think at that point I was like, I think this is terrible, but I'm also fascinated. So I was like, I was glued to the screen, but I was also like, this is kind of horrifying because it was like putting in Christopher Reeve, we got a quick little Adam West nod in there. There was things where I was like, okay, I get what they're doing. It felt like fan service on steroids, but it almost felt like fan service ironically because the CG was so bad that I was like, are they doing this to be like, yeah, here you go, here's your fucking fan service? Or are they doing it to be like, like, I was like, I don't know if this is meant to make me feel like, wow, really emotional seeing all these different people. And then when we got to Nick Cage fighting a giant spider, I was like, this is a joke, right? We're doing this as a joke. Like, we're not trying to make me take this seriously. And I just started laughing really hard because I was like, I don't even know, I couldn't wrap my head around what was going on.
I interpreted that final bit. I mean, like you just said, fan service on steroids. And I think I've heard somebody else make this argument as well. This is one of the last couple of films in this universe. What we have, the Blue Beetle, which I assume is connected. I feel sorry for that.
I think they said that's going to be brand new. Like that's first of the new.
That's the new universe. Yeah. And then you've got Momoa getting Aquaman 2, and then
which
it's all
I don't
done.
know what that is. I mean, again, like how this is what's so weird. It's like just cut it or keep it. Like they're doing these weird, like, well, we like this part from it, so we want to bring that, like Momoa having the sort of post credits with Momoa, and I was like, okay, but then does that mean that this is part of it? Is this a different part of the sort of spaghetti that we're looking at here? Is this a different Aquaman? Because I think he even says at one point, like, maybe Barry says, like, you're the same in every universe or something. So I'm like, so is this, which universe is this? And it's like, what, like, how are we keeping Momoa, but then we're getting rid of everything, but then we're maybe not getting rid of everything? And like, what is this?
Well, Gunn, I believe, has said Momoa might come back, but not as Aquaman.
Yeah.
This to me felt like almost a poorly timed conclusion. This was them, had they swapped Aquaman and the Flash, that ending would have made sense. The visuals don't work. I mean, and that's where I've heard some people have called that Christopher Reeve's thing ghoulish. That didn't come to mind. It looks a little rough, but to me the heart was there. To me, that was directed at the fans. You don't have George Reeves in there because nobody, I mean, you have them, but you don't have George Reeves in there to talk to, just the main old audience. At this point, it's a 70-year-old reference. So you're people of a certain age. You have the Nick Cage thing, that's going to a very distinct circle of nerdy film Twitter. Yeah. That ending was part of why I say this is a love letter to these superhero movies. This is throwing the nostalgia at you. This is trying to bring it all to a close. But once again, we've got weak graphics casting. I mean, I'm sure there's AI generators on people's phones. For real. They could have probably done better.
Yeah, it started to feel like a weird, like an Instagram filter where I was like, what is this? Like, what are we doing? And then like everything it almost felt like 2D in a lot of ways. Like even the Christopher Reeve like moment, I was like, is this like, did they take like a still image of him, like just a photo and kind of try to like warp it? It reminded me of like, in like The Sims 2, when you would have like, oh, you can have like a texture that they wrap around a mesh, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I was like, this feels very Sims 2 to me. I don't know if that's how you really want like, an emotional beat with like a beloved deceased actor to feel.
Yeah. The heart was in the right the heart was in the right place, but ultimately the execution could not live up to what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I could see this being brainstormed as a way to pay tribute to this first half of DC lore and all these people who have jumped in and wore the various capes and cowls. But they lost, and we keep saying this. We keep saying this with Marvel, and we keep saying this with DC. They lost the execution somewhere along the line. That could have worked beautifully. There could have not been a dry eye in the house when you saw that Christopher Reeve thing. And they didn't stick the landing.
Yeah. It was one of the strangest things, because I had seen leaks and I had seen the tweets and everything with the screenshots, and so much of it, when I would see a tweet where they were like, here's a clip of the CG in this or something, I was like, nah, that can't be real. Like, there's no way that's real. This is somebody on Twitter messing around. Like, there was a couple moments where the Flash travels back in time and kind of like pokes his head through and is looking around.
Yeah.
And it was like, there's that scene in Love and Thunder where Axel, Heimdall's son, is like this weird floating head and the CG looks terrible and everybody was dunking on it when it came out. And I was like, I kept seeing tweets that were like, that's in this. That's what this is. It's like, no, there's no way. No one would do something like that again after we've already seen how terrible that is. And then it was exactly
and
that.
They did it.
And I was just like, this is where I say, like, I couldn't decide, like, is this a joke or not? Like, is the fact that that's in there, is it meant to be a reference to how much everyone hated that in Love and Thunder? But then I'm like, it couldn't be, because they've been working on this for too long.
Yeah.
So I was just like, did we really make the same mistake in 2 comic book movies with this weird CG floating head thing? I mean, I guess we did. I don't know. This is what I mean. Like, I don't know. My brain doesn't know what to do with this movie.
This is why we're running into superhero fatigue, because both of these production houses, going back to the early years of the Snyderverse and their penchant for big, boxy, identity-less villains with horns, this CG on both sides of the comic book coin, has been so questionable of late. Love and Thunder showed, I mean, if even Taika Waititi is coming out and dunking on his own CG, you guys got problems.
I was really entertained by it. And I do think some of the stuff in it genuinely worked, but I also think there was a huge amount of me being entertained by it that was me being like, this is a shit show on the highest level. And it's kind of fascinating to watch that too. There was a bunch of times in this where I was like, they got a studio to pay for this. Yeah. Someone paid to do this. This has gone through multiple passes and so many people have signed off on this. And here it is on the screen looking like this. Basically, it's a Frankenstein monster. And that's kind of interesting to watch.
Textbooks will likely be, could be written behind this, what's his name? Feud, American Horror Story guy.
Oh, totally. A Ryan Murphy.
Ryan Murphy could do a series on probably the making of this film. He's probably working on it for after Truman Capote, this week or whenever that's premiering. I had the blessing of that first screening being very fan oriented, very communal. When Michael Keaton gets up there and goes, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." The whole place erupted. Wow. In cheers. And that can save a film. Yeah, good communal experience. Yes, it can direct it the right way. So even if you're not necessarily feeling it, when you hear the 150, 200 people cheering behind you, that will hit that sucker home and can show you exactly where the heart is supposed to be. When plasticky looking Christopher Reeve is on the screen, everybody cheered. When little boxy Adam West is running around in a circle, people laughed. Nicolas Cage got just an unreal kind of reaction throughout. That was who this movie is marketed for.
I don't know where they go from here, because it feels like it's just been such chaos in the DC universe. I'm sure James Gunn now will have a plan and try to make something of this. But even then, it's like, if we're keeping remnants of the old stuff, how do you tie that in a way that fits in with the new stuff?
It has been a giant mess since really Shazam. It's been like, what's the point? Are you guys, because they don't seem to be building to a close. I mean, That sequence in The Flash was as close as they've gotten to a close, but it wasn't really closure. It was nostalgia and it was fan service, but that didn't bring this 10-year arc of films to a close. But then again, DC has never came at it with a mindful building of a universe. They gave us Superman and then they went, oh, let's do Justice League.
Yeah.
And then they've been kind of trying to build it after Justice League. When Marvel, at least with all the shit I give Marvel, they laid the individual films before they did the Avengers. So they crafted the comic book arc. Yeah. DC went, we want that, but we don't want to wait.
The state of this is so odd that I don't know where it's going. And in a way, like, that makes it where I'm not rooting for it, but I'm definitely interested in where it's going to go. You know? So I will say, for me, it's like a half recommendation, but it's a recommendation in the sense of, like, if you can get by with just seeing the clips of this on Twitter and being like, how the hell does this exist? You're probably fine. But at some point, it's like the Snyder Cut. Like, I didn't want to watch the Snyder Cut, but I watched it out of weird curiosity because I was like, I can't not watch this. This is too weird of a thing to exist. So in that sense, I think it's a recommend. But the movie itself, I don't know that it's a recommend for me. So again, it's like, if you're watching this as like evidence or like from like an anthropological standpoint, then yeah, okay, you know. Like, but I don't know if you're watching this just to, hey, I'm going to sit down and watch a movie. I don't know if this is the one that I would recommend.
If you're a Snyder bro, this is not going to be your speed. You probably know that already. Chances are you've made up your mind 3 weeks ago whether or not you will go see this movie. If you like the quippy, and if you can look past the miles and miles and miles of baggage of this film, if you can just watch this as a movie and you're down for the quippy superhero, I think it's possible to really enjoy this one. You need to separate, you need to compartmentalize, and it's really depressing that I've been doing mental somersaults trying to write my review of this film, because now we have to compartmentalize as watchers, because if we acknowledge any of this shit, it pulls you back from the film, and they don't make it easy to just get lost in the film if you can. I think this is a fun, enjoyable watch that has some heart, but it's not going to be for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's our review. I'm like, I don't even know how to conclude. I'm like, so we saw this, and we saw it. And it's a movie that we saw that exists.
It's tanking this weekend, so go out and see Asteroid City when that comes out.
Exactly. It's like, if you have a choice between this and Asteroid City, go see Asteroid City. Just go see
Asteroid City. Support original film.
Yes.
IP's dying, original film is dying.
Exactly.
Support go see your local cinemas.
And if you don't want to go see a movie in a theater, go watch Polite Society on Peacock. It hit Peacock. Yes. That movie's great. Go check that one out. That's a small movie, really good story. Like, here are things you could watch instead of The Flash. So I think coming up, we will have Indiana Jones at some point. We'll figure out.
At some point.
That'll be coming at some point. But in the meantime, go see Asteroid City.
It's out next week. Markets around whenever this, I think if this airs next week, it should be out upcoming Friday. So if you're in New York and LA, see it now. And
everybody
next
else
week, if you're anywhere else.
Exactly. Well, thank you for watching or listening to our sort of weird analysis of what the hell the Flash movie is. And we hope that you will join us again when we discuss whatever it is we have coming up, probably Indiana Jones.
Indy next, probably.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on the socials. Reviews are linked in the description, and check out our other episodes, because we talked about some movies we actually really loved that were not a weird, confusing situation for us, that actually are just really interesting. So go check out some of our earlier stuff where we talk about movies we really loved. And
because we do like some.
Exactly. We do like movies. It's happened before. So thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.